Princess Kiria woke up from a nightmare. The fear of what she saw made her ran as fast as her legs could carry her through the long, echoing stone halls of the Abijana palace. Her bare feet slapped loudly against the cold, hard floor. She breathed fast, her heart beating very fast. She looked behind to see if anyone was following, and then she looked in front of her. Right above her head, a dark black bird was flying. The bird flew very close to her ear and spoke a loud, terrible secret directly into her mind. The bird said that a bad, jealous palace servant had just put poison into the queen's sweet drink. Kiria did not stop to think, because that was exactly what she saw in her nightmare. She used all her strength to push open the heavy wooden doors of the large throne room. Inside, her father, the king, was sitting on a giant wooden chair decorated with beautiful carvings of wild lions. Kiria fell to her knees right in front of him. She was shouting and stammering, trying to tell her father about the poison the queen is about to drink, and big drops of tears from her eyes, rolling down her cheeks. She begged the king to hurry to the queen's room. She begged him to stop the queen from drinking from her cup before it was too late. But the king did not stand up. He looked down at his little daughter and shook his head. Because adults sometimes do not understand magic, the king did not believe Kiria. He thought his daughter was just a sick little girl who was making up false, scary stories in her head because of a bad dream. Instead of helping, the king called out to the palace guards. Two very big, strong guards walked forward with heavy steps. They grabbed Kiria tightly by her arms and pulled her away from the king. Kiria screamed as loud as she could. She kicked her legs wildly in the air, trying to break free, but the guards were too strong. They carried crying Kiria all the way to her bedroom, pushed her inside, and locked the heavy wooden door so she could not get out. Kiria hit the heavy wooden door with her small hands. She hit the thick wood again and again until her hands bled red blood. She yelled for help until her throat hurt and her voice was gone. She asked the guards to please open the door, but nobody opened it. The guards just stood outside in the hallway like stone statues and did not listen to her cries. That night, because no one stopped her, the queen drank the cup. The poison worked, the queen died and became a ghost. The next day, when the bright sun came up, Kiria sat all alone on the cold floor of her room. She felt a sadness so big it felt like a heavy rock on her chest. Suddenly, a gentle white bird flew up to her window. The white bird sat quietly on the stone window ledge. It opened its small beak, but it did not make a normal bird chirping sound. Instead, the bird spoke with the exact, sweet voice of the queen. The bird said, "Do not cry, Kiria. I am here." This was the very first time Kiria ever heard a human ghost. The ghost of her mother was speaking to her through the little white bird. Hearing her mother's voice made Kiria feel a heavy pain of missing her. She cried even more water from her eyes because now she knew for sure that her beautiful mother was a ghost. From that sad day forward, Kiria possessed a very strong magic power. But this power also felt like a heavy curse. Kiria could hear the ghosts of people who had passed away. These ghosts spoke their secret thoughts through the wild birds. Whenever a bird flew anywhere in the sky, Kiria would hear the loud ghost voices echoing inside her head. Because the voices were too loud and scary, Kiria stopped going outside the palace to play. She hid deep inside the Abijana palace. The builders had built the palace with very high, thick stone walls, meant to look exactly the same as the ancient, mighty walls of Great Zimbabwe. Kiria stayed safely behind these strong walls. She wore a heavy cloth over her head, so she would not see the birds flying in the sky, and so she would not have to hear the noisy ghosts in her head. She did not speak to the palace maids who brought her food. She did not speak to the tall palace guards. She lived completely alone in her dark, quiet rooms. She ate her meals all by herself, and she slept alone in the quiet dark. 10 long years passed like this. Little Kiria grew up into a beautiful young woman. Whenever her father, the king, looked at her, he saw the face of his lost queen in Kiria's face. This made the king's heart very sad. The king also still believed that Kiria was sick in her head because she refused to talk to people and hid away. He decided that the best way to help her was to make her leave her dark room and marry a husband. The king looked across the land and chose a man named Kudan. On the outside, Kudan looked like a very good choice. He wore expensive, shiny beads around his neck. He owned many fat cows. He showed boxes of shiny gold to the king to prove he was wealthy. Because of this, the king forced Kiria to marry Kudan. Kiria did not fight the king's rules. She still felt very bad about not saving her mother 10 years ago. Because of human reasoning, she felt guilty and thought she deserved to have a sad, bad life. So, she quietly put on the colorful marriage beads and married Kudan. But the king did not know the truth. Kudan was actually a very bad, wicked man. Kudan did not get his boxes of gold from selling his cows. Kudan got his gold by using dark, bad magic. In secret, he always went to visit an ugly old sorceress. One dark night, the birds started making very loud, frantic noises. Many wild birds flew right up to Kiria's window, flapping their wings hard. The birds carried the sad cries of young ghosts. These young ghosts screamed loudly inside Kiria's head, crying and begging for help. The birds told Kiria she must walk to Moziri town right away. They said her husband, Kudan, was doing something terrible in Moziri town. Kiria knew she had to listen. She left the palace very quietly so the guards would not hear her. She walked alone in the dark night. She followed the dirt path, stepping carefully over roots and rocks, until she walked all the way to Moziri town. There, hidden in the shadows, she saw a small spooky hut made of dry mud and old wood. She sneaked closer to the hut and hid her body behind some large, baked clay pots. Very carefully, she looked through a small crack in the wooden wall. What she saw made her heart freeze. Kudan was inside the hut. He stood next to an old, wrinkly sorceress who wore dirty, torn clothes. The sorceress held a large, hollow calabash bowl. Kudan was holding a frightened young girl. The young girl cried loud tears and asked to go back to her home. But Kudan had a hard heart and did not listen to her cries. Kudan used a sharp iron knife, and he made the young girl a ghost. The blood of the young girl fell into the large calabash bowl. As the blood fell, the old sorceress chanted ancient, magic words. Right before Kiria's eyes, the blood magically changed its shape. The blood turned into shiny gold cowrie shells. Kudan smiled a greedy smile and eagerly scooped up the gold cowrie shells into his bag. Right at that moment, the ghost of the young girl flew up into the air. Her ghost went straight into a small bird that was sitting on the grass roof of the hut. The bird immediately flew down to where Kiria was hiding. The bird screamed a loud, sad warning into Kiria's head, telling her the whole bad secret. Kiria felt a massive shock go through her entire body. She was so scared that she quickly moved backwards to get away from the evil hut. But as she moved, her foot accidentally kicked one of the large clay pots. The heavy clay pot fell over and broke into many pieces. It made a very loud sound in the quiet night. Inside the hut, the old sorceress stopped her chanting. She lifted her nose and smelled the night air like a wild animal. She pointed a dead animal bone straight at the window and told Kudan that someone was watching them from the outside. Kudan's eyes grew wide and angry. He grabbed his heavy, sharp iron knife. He stomped over to the window and looked outside into the dark. There, hiding behind the broken pieces of clay, he saw his own wife, Kiria. Kudan yelled a very bad word in anger. He knew his secret was caught. Kiria spun around on her heels and ran as fast as a cheetah toward the dark, thick forest. The forest was very dark and full of scary shadows. Princess Kiria ran fast, breathing heavily as she pushed through the bushes. Her long, traditional braids whipped around and hit her face. The low tree branches scratched her arms, and the sharp thorn bushes cut her bare legs. But she could not stop. Kudan was chasing her. He ran fast behind her, gripping his heavy iron knife tight in his hand. Kudan wanted to use the knife to make Kiria a ghost too, so she could never tell the king his bad secret. Suddenly, Kudan raised his arm and threw his heavy iron knife through the air. The knife flew fast, spinning toward Kiria. The sharp iron knife hit a tree right next to Kiria's head. The blade stuck deep into the hard wood. Kiria stopped running for a second. She reached out and pulled the heavy iron knife out of the wood. She held the knife tightly in her own hand so she could defend herself if he got too close. Kiria started running again, but she made a big mistake. She looked back over her shoulder to see how close Kudan was, and she forgot to look at the ground in front of her. Her foot caught on a massive, thick tree root sticking out of the dirt. She tripped and fell down hard. She tumbled over and over down a very steep, rocky dirt hill. Her body hit the hard dirt and the big rocks, and she finally stopped at the bottom. Bright red blood dripped from a bad bruise on her leg. Up at the top of the hill, Kudan saw where she fell. He began to slide down the steep, dirty hill, following the trail of blood she left on the green leaves. Kiria forced herself to stand up, even though her leg caused her great pain. She limped over to a very wide, old tree and hid her body behind its thick trunk. She pressed her hands tightly over her ears. The voices of the ghosts in the forest were too loud. The ghosts screamed in fear. The night birds screamed on the trees. The noise was making her dizzy. Kiria felt more scared than she had ever felt in her whole life. She squeezed her eyes shut, holding the iron knife tight, just waiting for Kudan to find her in the dark. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a strong hand reached out and grabbed her arm. Kiria opened her mouth wide to scream for her life, but another hand quickly covered her mouth so she could not make a sound. Kiria looked up, her eyes full of fear, but it was not Kudan. It was Kudi. Kudi was a young, brave soldier. He was the exact same soldier who used to guard Kiria at the palace for many years when she was a little girl. Kudi gently pulled Kiria deeper into the dark trees. They crouched down low and hid perfectly still in the thick, leafy bushes. Just a moment later, Kudan walked right past their hiding spot. Kudan looked angrily around the dirt, but he didn't see them. He huffed and walked further away into the woods to try and find Kiria. Once Kudan was gone, Kudi slowly moved his hand away from Kiria's mouth. He didn't speak out loud. Instead, he raised his finger and pointed up at the tree branches. A black bird was sitting quietly on a branch right above their heads. Kudi looked at the black bird, and then he looked deep into Kiria's frightened eyes. Suddenly, a voice spoke clearly inside Kiria's head. But the voice did not belong to a sad bird ghost. The voice belonged to Kudi. Kiria gasped in amazement. Kudi had the exact same magic power as she did. He could hear the thoughts of the birds, and he could speak his own thoughts through the birds, too. For the first time in 10 years, Kiria realized she was not alone. Kudi spoke gentle words into her mind. He told her that she needed to command the ghosts, not run from them. He explained that her power was not a bad sickness like her father thought. He told her the power was actually a mighty tool for fighting bad people. He reminded her that she was a royal princess and a strong leader. He told her it was time to stop hiding from the scary voices, and it was time for her to be the boss and control them. Kiria listened to Kudi's wise words. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She focused all her mind. She felt the loud, swirling storm of screaming ghosts in her head. Instead of crying, she pushed her mind forward like a strong wind. With all her might, she commanded the ghosts to be quiet. She ordered the birds to stop their screaming. Instantly, the entire forest became completely, wonderfully quiet. The scary voices finally stopped. For the first time, Kiria felt incredibly strong. At that moment, she forgave herself for her mother's death. She finally understood that, as a little girl, she could not have stopped the poison 10 years ago. But she knew with all her heart that she was strong enough to stop bad Kudan today. Kiria felt her true, royal power glowing warm inside her body. But because the forest became so quiet, Kudan heard the silence. He stopped walking away and turned back around. He marched back toward the wide tree. When he pushed the bushes aside, he saw Kiria and Kudi hiding in the leaves. Kudan yelled a mighty roar of anger. He reached behind his back and pulled out a long, deadly iron sword. Seeing this, brave Kudi quickly pulled out his own iron sword to protect the princess. The two men charged at each other. They fought fiercely in the dirt. Their heavy iron swords crashed together, making loud sounds that echoed in the quiet night. But Kudan had the dark, bad magic inside his body from the old sorceress. This bad magic made Kudan unfairly strong. Kudan swung his sword very hard, knocking Kudi's blade away, and then he kicked Kudi right in the chest. Kudi fell hard onto his back in the dirt. His iron sword slipped from his hand. Kudan stood tall over Kudi, laughing an evil laugh. He raised his sharp sword high in the air, ready to strike down and make brave Kudi a ghost. But Kiria did not hide behind the tree anymore. She bravely stepped forward into the moonlight. She looked up at the dark canopy of the trees. The branches were full of hundreds of wild birds watching the fight. Kiria used her new confidence and commanded the birds with her powerful mind. She pointed her finger straight at wicked Kudan. Suddenly, a massive, dark cloud of wild birds flew down from the night sky. Hundreds of birds swooped down and attacked Kudan all at once. The birds furiously scratched Kudan's face with their sharp little claws. They beat his arms with their heavy, flapping wings. They bit his hands with their hard, pointy beaks. Kudan yelled a loud cry of pain and fear. He was so overwhelmed by the angry birds that he dropped his iron sword. He had to use both of his hands to cover his eyes so the birds would not peck them. Because Kudan was distracted, Kudi rolled over and stood up fast from the dirt. He leaped forward and grabbed Kudan's arms tightly. Kudi used his soldier strength to push the struggling Kudan hard to the ground. Quickly, Kudi pulled a thick, strong rope from his waist belt. He tied Kudan's hands tightly together behind his back. Then, he tied Kudan's legs together so he could not kick or run. Kudan was trapped like a bug in a web and could not move his body at all. With Kudan captured, Kiria commanded the helpful birds again. She told the flock of birds to fly as fast as the wind all the way back to the Abijana palace. She ordered the birds to fly into the king's bedroom and wake him up. She told them to wake up all the strong palace guards. Most importantly, she told the birds to guide the guards to the spooky hut in Mythology town so they could see the proof of the blood and the gold. The massive group of birds chirped in agreement and flew away incredibly fast. Soon, they reached the royal palace. They flapped their wings loudly against the glass and made a huge, noisy ruckus at the windows. The king woke up with a start. The guards woke up and grabbed their spears. When the king looked out the window, he saw the giant, strange group of birds circling in the sky, acting like they wanted him to follow. Because it was so unusual, the king decided he must follow the birds to see what they wanted. The king and his guards lit bright, orange fire torches to see in the dark. They marched quickly down the dirt path, following the flying birds all the way to Mythology town. When they arrived, the birds hovered over the small mud hut. The king bravely walked inside the hut. Inside, he found the wicked old sorceress hiding in the corner. The king looked at the floor and saw the large calabash bowl. He saw the terrible red blood, and he saw the shiny gold cowrie shells that Kudan had made from doing bad magic. After showing the king the hut, the birds flew toward the dark forest. The king and his guards followed the birds deep into the trees. There, in a small clearing, the king found his brave daughter, Kiria. He found the loyal soldier, Kudi, and he saw the evil man, Kudan, tied up tightly on the ground with thick rope. Standing in the forest, the king finally understood the whole truth. He realized that Kudan was not a good, wealthy man, but an evil monster. The king knew that his daughter, Kiria, was telling the exact truth today about the magic and the bad deeds. And because of this, the king finally realized that little Kiria had told the absolute truth 10 years ago about the poisoned drink. The king's heart felt very heavy, and he felt incredibly sorry for not believing Kiria when she tried to save her mother. The king gave a strict, booming order. His guards rushed forward and grabbed the tied-up Kudan. Other guards dragged the wicked old sorceress out from the mud hut. Using their sharp, royal swords, the guards executed Kudan and the old sorceress right there in the dirt. Because of their bad actions, Kudan and the sorceress became ghosts long before the morning sun even came up in the sky. That very day, the king changed the strict rules of the kingdom forever. He declared that no father would ever force a woman to marry a bad man again just because he had cows and gold. The king stood before all the villagers and told the people that Princess Kiria was a brilliant, strong, and powerful woman. He proudly announced that Kiria's special gift had saved the entire kingdom from evil, Kiria and Kudi returned to the beautiful stone palace together. Because they had saved each other's lives, they loved each other very much. Soon, they were married in a giant, happy, colorful ceremony with lots of music and dancing. Many, many years later, when the king grew to be a very old man and eventually became a peaceful ghost himself, Kiria and Kudi became the new queen and king. They ruled the great Abijana kingdom together with fairness and love. They were never afraid of the magic power again. They used their special gift every single day. They listened carefully to the songs of the birds, and they listened respectfully to the whispers of the ghosts. Because of this, they could always find bad people very quickly, and they always protected the good, innocent people. Together, Queen Kiria and King Kudi kept their beautiful kingdom perfectly safe from all enemies, happily ever after.